Module 5, Lessons 10 and 11 on area. First thing we need to do is a reminder of how do you find the area of an object. When you're finding area of an object, you are finding the length times the width. You'll sometimes see the formula is A equals L times W. If we're working with our units, things become square units. We might have square units or units squared with a little 2 next to it. That's another way to do square units. So instead of just finding the length times the width, the questions are going to ask you to figure out the length and the width and then solve it. So in this case, the rectangle to the right is composed of squares. Since they're squares, we know that means that every side is congruent or equal. And each of these squares measures 2 1/4 inches on each side. So this is 2 1/4. And then over here, then that means that this is 2 1/4. And they're both inches. And that means that this is 2 1/4, this is 2 1/4, this is 2 1/4. And this is 2 1/4, and this is 2 1/4. So when I want to figure out the sides, the first thing I'm going to do is take 2 1/4 and multiply it by 1, 2, 3, 4 for the length. So I'm going to do 2 1/4 times 4 for the length. Whenever I multiply mixed numbers, I should turn them into improper fractions first. And now I can multiply straight across, and I end up with 9. So this whole entire side here is 9 inches. Now I'm going to look over here, and I'm going to figure out this side of it. I have 2 1/4 times 1, 2, 3, because they're squares. So I have 2 1/4. Let's separate this so we can see it. Times 3. I turn it into an improper fraction, times 3. And I end up with 27/4, which gives me 6 3/4 inches. So this whole thing here is 6 3/4 inches. Now I want to figure out how to find the area. Well, I have my length and my width. So to figure out my area, I multiply my length times my width, which is 9 times 6 3/4, which would be 9 times 27 over 4, because I turn it into an improper fraction. Some of you might need to come over on the side and do something like this to solve this. And you end up with that. So now I have 243 over 4, and I have to divide. And when I divide this, I get 60 3/4 inches squared, because it's the area. And that would be my answer. Next, I have a rectangle. This time it's talking about the perimeter. Perimeter means the distance around the outside or the rim. And my rectangle, we're going to draw it, has a perimeter of 35 1/2 feet. It then tells me that the length is 12 feet. So this is 12 feet. And in a rectangle, opposite sides are equal, so this is 12 feet. And I need to find out the width in order to find the area. So if I add 12 and 12, I have 24. And if I take that away from what I already know, I end up with 11 1/2. So I have 11 1/2. That 11 1/2 I have to split between this side and this side. I'm splitting it between two sides. Since I'm splitting it between two sides, I take 11 1/2 and I divide it by 2. So it's keep, change, flip, just like our last module. And then we need to make sure that we turn this into an improper fraction so we can multiply. And we end up with 23/4, which is 5 3/4. So we now know that this is 5 3/4 feet, and this is 5 3/4 feet. And now I want to find the area. In order to find the area, I take my length and I multiply it times my width. And in this case, I'm going to take my length. I'm going to turn my width into an improper fraction. I might not be able to do that on my head, so I'm going to come over here and do 12 times 23. And I end up with 176 fourths. And when I have 176 fourths, I divide 176 divided by 4. And I end up with 44. So my area would be 44 square feet. And then I go back and look because something seems off. So now I'm going to go back to my multiplication all the way back to here. There should have been a 2 here. So that should be 2, which would make this 276, which now changes my whole answer. And in this case, I now have 69 square feet. It's always good to double check your work, to go back to make sure that you did your multiplication right. Next problem. We're talking about Colleen and Caroline. So they both have rectangles. So we're going to draw them here. We have Colleen and we have Caroline. And they both have tiles that are square tiles. They're square again, so they're all the same size, that are 3 by 5. So I'm drawing my picture like it asked me to. Colleen's tiles are 1 2/3. This is just like our first problem. And Caroline's tiles are 3 1/3. And we have to figure out the lengths and the widths of each. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to take our 1 2/3, which is right here, and I'm going to multiply to figure out the length by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because they are square, they're all the same. So when I do that, I'm going to turn this into an improper fraction, and I end up with 25 thirds, which is 8 1/3 centimeters. Now I'm going to figure out the width. So once again, we're going to use 1 2/3. This time we're going to multiply it by 1, 2, 3. We're going to go to our improper fraction again. And we end up with 15 thirds, which is 5 centimeters. So we now have the length of Colleen's and the width of Colleen's. Then we come over to here and we work on Caroline's, doing it the same way. She's 3 1/3, and there's 5 across here. And we turn it into an improper fraction and multiply. And we get 50 thirds, which gets me 16 2/3 centimeters. That's our length. And then we go and we do the width, and we do 3 1/3 times 3, because there's 3 over here. And we make the improper fraction. And we end up with 30 thirds, which is equal to 10 centimeters, which is our width. So now we have found the length and the width for both of them. I now have to find the area, which is part B. So we have Colleen, and her area, her length was 8 1/3 centimeters times 5. And then we have Caroline, and her length was 16 2/3 times 10. So over here, we're going to turn this into an improper fraction. So we end up with 41 2/3 square centimeters. And now we're going to go to Caroline, and she ends up over here. We have, I apologize, 50 thirds times 10, which gets us to 500 thirds. Square centimeters. And now we have both of their areas. And when we go down to the bottom, where we have to now compare them, we see that Caroline, who has one of 166 and 2/3 square centimeters, is greater than Colleen, who has 41 and 2/3 square centimeters. Now, once again, we're going to talk about the perimeter. So we have a square that has a perimeter of 51 inches. Because it's a square, we know every side is congruent or equal, so we're really doing 51 divided by 4. And when we do 51 divided by 4, because we're splitting up to figure out each side, we know we have 12, which is 48, and 3/4 left over, so each side is 12 3/4 inches. Now to find the area, length times width, so one side times the other side. So I do 12 3/4 times 12 3/4. We have to make them improper. Going to do some math work over here. I end up with 2,601 over 16. Not something that many people can do in their head, so they should also come to the side. And we end up with 162 and 9/16 square inches. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going over the homework. So Rachel made a mosaic from different color rectangular tiles. 3 tiles measured 3 1/2 inches times 3. So here's our 3 tiles, and they each are 3 1/2 inches times 3. And then we have the other tiles, and each of these tiles, there's 6 of them, they are all 3 1/4 inches times 4. So now I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to add this all up. And when I add this all up right here, I get 10 1/2. So to figure out the area of this, I'm going to do 3 times 10 1/2. Turn it into an improper fraction. Comes out to 31 1/2 square inches. Now over here, we want to add all this up. And we end up with 19 1/2. So we're going to do 4 times 19 1/2, which would be the same as 4 39/2. And when we do that, we end up with 78 square inches. And now we have found the area of each of these separate, but you made a mosaic with all of this. So now I need to add 31 1/2 plus 78. And we end up with 109 1/2 square inches. Next, a garden box has a perimeter of 27 1/2 feet. If the length is 9 feet, what is the area of the garden box? So we have the garden box. We know the perimeter is 27 1/2 feet. That's not the area, it's the perimeter, it's the distance all the way around. The lengths are 9 feet. So just like before, we're going to add 9 and 9 and get 18 and subtract it from here. And we have 9 1/2 feet that we have to split between here and here. So we take our 9 1/2 feet and we divide it by 2. So we keep, change, flip, make an improper fraction, and we end up with 4 3/4 for each side. Then to find the area, we have to do the length times the width. So we have 9 times 4 3/4, which is 9 times 19/4. And we're going to multiply that out. We end up with 171/4, which then gives us 42, and so I'm trying to do that quickly in my head. 42 3/4 square feet. So that's, for those of you who can't read that in the corner, 42 3/4 square feet. Next, we have a square that has a perimeter of 25. We know these are all equal, so 25 divided by 4 would give me 6 1/4. So every side is 6 1/4. So when I find the area, I do 6 1/4 times 6 1/4, which is really like doing 25/4 times 25/4. And when you multiply 25 times 25, we're going to do that over here. We have 625 over 16. And now we're going to, we can't leave that like that, so we'll do 16 into 625. And we'll end up with 39 1/16 square, gotta look back up here, inches. And that's lessons 10 and 11 on finding area.